Growing up, I knew my parents were there for me. We celebrated family events. They were there for me when I was sick or needed help. As me and my sister grew up, we knew we could count on our parents. We were so proud to be their children. Today, we are there for our parents, to share in the celebration of their grandchildren or to be there when they are ill or need assistance. They can count on us. And now our parents look to us to take care of them. Hello, and welcome to Always There. This is Michael Wilsker, and we're going to be talking about some issues today that affect the seniors. I am an owner of a care agency called Always Best Care Senior Services. The agency provides in-home non-medical care for seniors, and we also provide a free assisted living placement service. So if you're always, any time you may be interested in looking at assisted living, we can help you with that locally or nationwide. So today we're going to be talking about long-term care facilities and rehabilitation facilities, and I'm happy to have as my guest Lynn Alexandrowicz.
Alexandrowicz.
Alexandrowicz. I always get names wrong, so I apologize for that, Lynn. I've only known Lynn for about 4 years. So. Lynn is Director of Admissions and Marketing for Marlboro Hills Health and Rehabilitation Center, which is located in Marlboro. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you for having me.
Lynn, can you just give the audience your background and what your role is as
Sure.
Director of Admissions and Marketing?
I've been in the healthcare arena for about 30 years in different venues, which is, the irony is about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I worked for an organization that owned the nursing center that I'm working for now. It was under another name. And so I look at my career either has gone full circle or it's been stalled because I'm back at the location under a different ownership and different name of the company, name of the nursing center 25 years later. So, but I've been in all different venues of healthcare, from management, operations, and marketing, from assisted living to home care to nursing home centers and hospitals also.
And just tell us about what your role is in admissions and marketing.
As Director of Admissions, I pretty much, Director of Admissions and Marketing, from the admissions perspective, I pretty much guide having the patient from the hospital setting, getting the patient to come to our facility, working with their family members, working with case managers, working with the insurance companies, evaluating their clinical aspect with my team of nurses and physicians, and then working to with business office, my business office manager in regards to the health insurance coverage, and making a decision to accept the patient, which normally we do. But it's quite a process. Everything now is electronic. So from the hospital's perspective, they send out information on your computer or phone electronically, and you can review that patient information. It's all HIPAA controlled, obviously, and review that patient information and make your decision to accept the patient and gather the information that you need from a clinical aspect and insurance aspect and the contact information for families.
So that's the rehabilitation side.
That's all of
for both.
long-term, both, yeah. For the rehabilitation side, we actually have 196 beds at our facility, and how it's broken down is we have short-term units and long-term care units. Our short-term care unit is really for someone coming in short-term. So with the baby boomers, including myself, who were very sports-directed growing up, now we're seeing the knee replacements, hip replacements because of those injuries that occurred when we were younger and affecting our ability now. So we see the average age coming in now for knee and hip replacements are really in their 50s and 60s. And coming in and they have their surgery at one of the local hospitals, come to us. We have a wonderful physical therapy department that includes physical rehabilitation as well as occupational, speech, and we're known for respiratory therapy also. But from an orthopedic perspective, we work with the orthopedic surgeons in the area. And we have their patients come in, and they can be short-term from anywhere from 5 to 10 days. They come in for extensive rehab and then get discharged home. And then when they go home, they receive services like from your company, your company as you yourself, and other home health companies in the area that can come into the home, or they go out to outpatient clinics for continued rehabilitation.
Now, does the patient that becomes a resident from the hospital, do they have a choice as to where they go?
Patients always have a choice. A lot of it is directed by insurances, so depending on what that patient has for insurance kind of dictates what nursing centers and rehab centers they can go to. We are lucky that we pretty much contract with all the national providers as well as the local providers, so the Fallons of the world and what have you in this market, to Blue Cross Blue Shield, to pretty much everything in between. So we're Medicare and Medicaid certified. Private pay also, as well as all your other HMO care management groups out there.
So when you say you're Medicare, Medicaid certified, how does that work?
Well, when you reach a certain age, you become Medicare eligible, so you have your Medicare kicks in, and that covers you so many days within a nursing home setting. Based on your diagnosis and what have you, and being skilled, needing skilled care, which is nursing care or rehab care. Medicaid is a state-run division, so each state has their own Medicaid programs. Medicare is a national program, so that's pretty much straight across the boards in all our states. Medicaid, depending on your financials situation, you can apply for Medicaid at a young age as well as somebody in their 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Now, it's my understanding that if you don't, that if Medicare terminates coverage because it's their decision that you've gone through and you've got enough attention, and the patient decides they don't want to leave because they believe that they still need more services. Now, if it's not covered by health insurance, then that would have to be out of pocket, correct?
Depends. If they have a secondary, you always have a primary usually and a secondary insurance. So depending on what you have for a secondary insurance, sometimes it will pay for that copay or additional stay, or it could be private pay out of pocket that you would continue to pay. So Medicare usually allows you 100 days per segment, and they will cover from days 0 to 21 at 100%, and then days 21 to, let's say, 99, there is a copay charge, and that changes every year. But if you have a secondary insurance, it sometimes picks up that copay charge.
Now let's switch a little bit to the long-term care part of the facility. If someone wants to stay in long-term care and they don't qualify for Medicaid, then they have to pay private pay.
They would
correct?
pay privately, and then they could spend down. They might not qualify today for Medicaid, depending on what their financials are, and they could, the term is used, spend down, so they could pay privately for their care and bring their costs down financially to whatever their assets are. It has to be $2,000 or less this year in the state of Massachusetts. And then they can apply for Mass Health again.
And what could it run private pay?
Private pay varies. Each nursing center there's 420 nursing centers in Massachusetts alone. So each nursing center has their own rates. Depending on if it's a private room, semi-private, triple, or quad room, it can run anywhere from $300 to $500 a day.
Per day. Wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah. Can you tell me, long-term care facility used to be called nursing homes, is that correct? And is there any difference between them?
You know, it's still the same. It's, you know, the nursing homes have evolved over the years. Our building itself is 51 years old. So when that nursing center started 51 years ago, it really was started by a family out of Marlborough who really saw a need for caring for the aging in the community. And they were pretty much visionaries back then. So basically they started out as you would bring a loved one there or a family member there that really needed care and where you weren't able to take care of that loved one at home. So their permanent address, so to speak, would be in the nursing center. But now nursing centers really have evolved where you really focus on the short-term, the rehab, as well as the long-term placement also. But, you know, much more the activities that go on and working with the family members, very involved with their loved ones and the residents at the nursing homes in the area. So nursing homes pretty much really have evolved, and they go by rehabilitation centers, facilities. There's a whole all different alphabet soup, so to use for nursing homes.
Yeah, because when I was younger, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, her name was, we called her Bubba. I still remember she went into a rest home, and that's what they were, I don't know if that's what nursing homes were called in those days?
No, they were
Or
separate. There's still rest homes in the Massachusetts area. There's really only a handful of them now.
And how do they differ from
Rest
nursing
homes
homes?
differ, but they're not regulated in as much as nursing homes are in this market, and more independent. So really, kind of people go in and they might need a little care, so little care is given to them in the rest home setting, but it's totally different than a nursing setting.
Is it closer to being in like an assisted living?
I would say actually not. No, more independent living. They're
More
pretty much
independent living.
independent with some care
And it's
involved.
lower cost?
Lower cost.
How much lower cost?
That I'm not
Are they
sure.
subsidized by the government at all? Rest homes?
Rest homes usually are private pay, so I'm not quite sure. I don't really
That's
deal with a
interesting.
lot of rest homes. As I said, there's only a handful in the Massachusetts area right now.
And can you explain what the relationship is between a hospital and the rehab center and how you communicate?
Again, a lot of it's done
Electronically.
electronically now, or there are case managers and social workers assigned to the patients when they're in the hospital setting, and they communicate and coordinate that patient's care when they're being discharged, and that would be dealing with myself, or we have clinical evaluators who are nurses that are out in the hospitals, actually physically go to the hospitals every day. Most of your nursing homes and facilities in the area have that same program. So they are there every day at the hospital. So they're working closely hand in hand with the case managers, discharge planners, as well as social workers within the hospitals and the outlining cities and communities.
So you have a social worker and a case manager
And a discharge planner
and a
at the
discharge
hospital.
at the hospital. How do they differ, or are they the same for the people that work at rehab centers?
Well, hospitals are totally different than nursing homes. So social workers actually, have their degree, have gone on to school for social workers. Discharge planners and case managers can sometimes be a social worker or a nurse. They usually have an educational background, in healthcare or in social services, or they've been in the industry for quite some time and have, got their education that way within a hospital setting. When you come to a nursing home or a facility or a rehab center, your case managers and discharge planners are either social workers or nurses that we work with at each facility that our company represents.
And what exactly is the process?
The process for
discharge
being
process?
discharged, well, again, a lot of it is directed by insurances. So insurances can dictate that if you had a total need, they say, well, we're going to give a certain leveling for that patient, and we're going to give them 10 days of service at your facility. So you can, apply for further time if needed. Sometimes the insurance companies say, no, that's the limit, that's what we're allowing. So we know that we have 10 days to work with that patient to get them back to a baseline. So the case managers and social workers within a nursing home setting work with discharging the patient, also working with the families and doing all the required paperwork that's very, very lengthy, that's required by the insurance companies, as well as the regulations that are required of the overseers. The Department of Public Health, DPH, are the overseers of nursing centers in Massachusetts.
So who creates the discharge plan, and who do they work with? Do they just deal with the patient themselves, or they bring the family
They
in?
deal with the
Their family's doctor?
the family, the doctors, the settings that the resident lives in. So they could be living in elderly housing and they have to do stairs versus an elevator, and they just had a hip replacement. So we're working in some of our OT, so we have PT, physical therapy, occupational therapy. Sometimes our occupational therapists they'll do a dry run. They'll go home with the patient, look at the situation that the patient has for movability. So if they have a walker and they have to do stairs, or they're limited with furniture, how it's placed within their apartment setting, and they have a walker or a wheelchair now, they will work with maybe rearranging the furniture, making sure that the patient has a safe setting to go home to.
Can you explain the difference between, I've heard that there's acute rehab centers. Like, is that Whittier, which is in
Those are
Westboro, as opposed
hospitals.
to Marlboro?
Those are actually hospitals. So even though they use the term rehabilitation, they're licensed as rehabilitation hospitals. So they're not licensed as nursing centers.
So they don't have long-term care.
They don't.
They just have rehab care and they,
Right, and they're taking care of you clinically.
Right.
We work closely with the rehab hospitals in the market, as Whittier, you know, in Westboro, and the other rehabilitation hospitals in the marketplace.
So those rehab hospitals, they generally have seniors also, or they can have
They have
younger
a mix.
people?
They have
more of a
younger
mix?
populations. They do a lot of brain injury. They do a lot of spinal cord injury, brain injury, as well as you know, very advanced clinical situations. So sometimes what would happen is, let's say a resident gets in an automobile accident and they have a brain injury. They go to the hospital. They've also had some other situations because of that accident, but really they're having a difficult time, and they get sent from the hospital to a rehabilitation hospital, as you had mentioned in this market. And then from that point in time, they are there receiving care, and then they feel that it's a need for them to come to a nursing center. So there's a lot of steps that can be involved in that patient's care and getting that patient back to a baseline, or getting them back to everyday life, so to speak.
And what hospitals does Marlboro Hills
We
do?
work closely with all the community-based hospitals, so Marlboro Hospital, obviously, the UMass system, Metro West, the Tenants, which owns Metro West and St. Vincent's, and then your outlining hospitals. I just had a patient come in from South Shore Hospital the other day because a family member lived up here who
Lives
was
up
the
here.
caretaker
Right.
and didn't want to be running to Braintree every day. So.
What about the Boston Hospital?
Boston Hospitals work closely with Boston also. My company organization actually owns nursing centers in Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. So I see patients coming into my facility not only from the local market, but also can be transferring over from another state, or depending on where their family lives and what have you.
Now, you said you had 178 beds, is that?
We have
something like that?
196 beds.
Now, is that considered large?
That is large
facility?
nowadays, but when nursing centers were built 50 years ago, that was pretty much the norm. Now, if they're being built, being built on a smaller caliber, but that's what they were built years ago. They were always like 200 or 150 and above nursing beds to you know, service the elderly in the community.
So do you have a number of rehab beds as opposed to
We
long-term beds?
have different
Are they all
units. We have a
intermingled?
short-term unit as well as a long-term unit. So sometimes we'll have a resident come in and they'll move into our short-term unit, and then the family really decides maybe it would be best for their loved one to stay with us permanently. So at that point in time, we move them from our short-term unit to our long-term care unit. So I have 3 floors at my facility. So they would move to our 2nd or 3rd floor if they became long-term.
Now, do you have memory loss?
We have patients that have diagnosis of Alzheimer's and dementia, and we have secured units on certain floors. So that means that there are, you can't really enter or exit without doing a code to enter onto the unit and exit onto the unit. So, and we do have patients that are diagnosed with memory impairments.
Now, how would that differ from the memory loss neighborhoods that they have in assisted living?
Assisted living is totally different. They're regulated totally different. From a clinical aspect, we have around the clock 24 hours a day of registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, LPNs and RNs, rehab staff, so very different than an assisted living is.
So let me ask you this. If you had a parent that has memory issues and the assisted living says we can't handle that, will they then go to a facility
They would.
like
We
yours?
work a lot with the assisted livings in the market, so that does happen if it gets to the point where as their disease progresses and they need more care than can be offered at that point in time, and they feel sometimes it's a safety issue maybe that, you know, they need a registered nurse around the clock or what have you, then they could come to my nursing center or any others in the market also.
Let me just ask you this also. If you're a resident in assisted living and you run out of money, that means you can't go into a nursing home. Even you may qualify for Medicaid, you cannot go into a nursing home or long-term care facility unless you are qualified to go in. Is that correct?
Right.
You have to have a
Right, but
condition that will
depends. Sometimes
qualify.
they have other insurances, so they end up in the hospital and then they come to our facility for skilled care, so for nursing care or physical therapy. Or they would then look at private paying. Again, everyone's situation is totally different. And a lot of the assisted livings out there now have really taken on, from a clinical aspect, they really take a higher level than they used to. So again, it depends on what assisted living you're in and what their availability is for caring.
And what kind of activities take place?
We
in a
have
long-term
multiple
care?
activities. So, everybody loves bingo. But I'm sorry, if I have to go in for a knee replacement and I'm in there for 7 days, I never played bingo. I don't want to play bingo.
No, play bingo.
So we really look at the future. Our company really looks at the future of people coming in for services. So we really look at Wi-Fi. We're all hooked to Wi-Fi, and the accessibility of using your phone and a computer and whatever. And we have, we're hardwired and have our computers available in the activity rooms for families and residents to utilize, as well as if someone's using their cell phone or whatever to get information off of. So we really look at the future, but other activities that are included from painting to cooking to a lot of music. This Wednesday being Veterans Day, we are actually having the mayor of Marlborough come in, and we have quite a few veterans, staff, as well as our residents, and we're going to be doing a ceremony for the staff and residents that have served in the multiple wars over the years. So.
And what exactly is the role of the nurse at a long-term
To
care?
coordinate care for our residents. So you have from supervisors to nurses on the floor to nurses on the cart. Some, control the medication and just dispense the medication. Some are involved hands-on. Some are just, supervising staff. So each nurse has a different role.
And what's typically the ratio of patients
That
to
changes,
nurses?
again, in every nursing home, that changes. It depends on what the census is for the day and what size your nursing center is, so it changes every day.
If a family wants their loved one to have extra care, additional care that they would get at the facility, can they bring in their own CNA or their own
That would
care
have to be
agency?
discussed with the nursing center. Each nursing center has their own policies and regulations, so that's something that would have to be discussed.
Because we've provided companion care, where the senior wants some more
Right.
attention, and we go in there and we don't provide any kinds of on-hand care.
Right.
But
But
in fact, we
again-
did that in Marlborough Hills
Right.
a few years ago before you got there.
Sure. Yeah. And that would, that would be discussed with our administrator, or any administrator, because everybody's centers have different rules and regulations.
And what are the roles of the people that support the nursing staff? Is that certified nursing assistants, home
CNAs,
health
yeah, we
aides?
have certified nursing assistants we utilize. Home health aides are usually used in a home care setting or sometimes assisted living, but ours are certified nursing assistants. And then we have physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and then there are like PTAs, which are physical therapy assistants who have gone to school, occupational therapists, OTAs, which are occupational therapist assistants also. We also have rehabilitation respiratory therapists, which is quite unique to a lot of the other nursing centers in the area. We have a focus of a pulmonary program. So we actually have a group of physicians, pulmonologists that come to our center weekly, work with our respiratory therapists. So anybody that has COPD or any type of bronchitis or asthma or any type of pulmonary program. We see a lot of that, especially with the weather forecast changing eventually, that affects anyone diagnosed with any pulmonary programs. We also, from an orthopedic perspective, have some of the Marlborough orthopedic physicians actually come to our center and see patients at our center, which are their patients too. They come to our center weekly too. And we have a slew of physicians that are on staff with us, from a medical director down to other physicians that see patients at our center.
Now, how does the physician at the center communicate with the primary care physician?
Normally, that they, as anybody else communicates, either via phone, usually fax, phone, emails, what have you, and we also coordinate that. And our social services works with the primary care physicians to keep them informed, especially when they're being discharged. So, and then we have outcome reports that we can bring to the primary care physicians to see when that patient came in, especially if it was an orthopedic patient, where they came in at and when they were being discharged, what the outcome was.
So if the patient has to go see a specialist or go see their primary care physician, they can be transported to their offices? And does that
Absolutely.
happen a lot, or based on what you've just said?
Depends, yeah. Sometimes they have to have somebody that had to go back for some minor surgery. So he went out to have his surgery yesterday and will probably be coming back to us in 2 days. So.
Just interested, how's the food there?
The food is really good.
'Cause-
Yeah, it is good. We actually have a slew of chefs that are very, very good, and we have a wonderful. We actually have an in-house dietitian, so that works with our whole dietary department and making sure the meals are what they need to be, from people that are diabetic and they have to have a diabetic diet, to people who are on blended foods and whatever based on their diagnoses.
And do the majority or all of them eat in the dining room, or like in a hospital they bring the food to
It depends. They have the decision. We have a nice bistro, which you were at a
Yes.
function this week, and families. We encourage families to come and dine with them. We're just putting together our holiday dinner for our residents and their families, which we'll be doing in December. And we were choosing what we were going to be having for an entrees and appetizers, but. Families have a choice to come in, and the residents have a choice. They can go to our dining room, or they can eat in their room, or in each of our units, on each of our floors, nursing units, we have a whole area that's set up with a kitchen, refrigerator, microwave, sink, tables, TV, so residents can dine there as well.
Oh, that's great. That sounds like fun. I'm not anxious to go into a long-term facility, but I guess if I did, that would probably be what I'd be looking for. And then just getting back to Medicaid. Once you qualify for Medicaid, can you then select the long-term care facility you'd like to be placed in?
Depends. A lot of people come in Mass Health pending, so they're already at our facility, and then their Medicaid kicks in, it goes retro back. So a lot of times people already have that in place when they're at the hospital. They have Mass Health already in place. So they can decide what facility has availability. Depending on the day, your rooms change every day, what your availability is. And sometimes you have to have somebody that needs a private room because they're on precautions. So depending on where they're coming in from and what nursing center has that availability.
Now, I've heard the term Medicaid beds, private pay beds. Does that exist?
Not really. We that's kind of an old term. That's not, everyone has private pay, has Medicare, Medicaid, and your managed care. So the beds are flexible. We don't set aside a certain area and say, oh, that can only be for private pay.
Right.
No, some centers do. We don't have that philosophy.
Okay, well, I think we've come to the end. Is there anything you want to add to what we've discussed?
I think there's a great opportunity for so many nursing centers in the area to get involved in the community, and we're getting very involved in working with the local communities and the COAs in the area, Council on Agings. And if anybody would ever love to come to any of our nursing centers in our 3 states and tour, we're always open. You don't have to have an appointment. You can come in and tour anytime. So I recommend that you come in and see what nursing centers are about. They've changed over the years.
Yes, they have. Very
For the
much
better.
So, for the better. Well, Lynn, I want to thank you for
Thank
coming
you very much.
on the show.
Appreciate it. Thank
Provide
you.
all the information that's, I think, very helpful to our audience. I want to thank you for all viewing our show today, and hope to see you again at our next show. And if you have any comments or you have any questions for Lynn, you can contact me at always there at westborotv.org. Until next time, thank you and have a great day.